Thank you so much for the presentation and thank you for inviting me to be part of this speaker series. I'm very excited to see some faces that I recognize, some names that I recognize, and I wanted to ask you if you could please write in the chat where are you located. I'm very interested in knowing where everyone is right here. I know that in some countries it's very late at night right now, and I also know that we're finishing the semester, so it's a tough moment and it's a very busy moment for many of us. So I really thank you for being part of this conference. My talk today it's about dealing with cases of bullying when they already occur. Most of the work that we have been doing in our research group has been on preventing aggression and preventing bullying situations. But we know that even if we do all the work that we could do, there are still cases of bullying and we need to learn how to deal with those cases. And we also need to use those cases as opportunities to learn and to promote the type of relationships that we are trying to promote. So that's what we have been doing recently, and that's what I want to share with you. And I also want to know, want to let you know that this is very much a work in progress. It's a protocol that we have been piloting at a small scale with a qualitative approach. And we are still in the process of trying out and making changes. So this is, if you have suggestions about it, if you have done something differently, it would be very helpful for us to hear the comments, the questions, the suggestions that you have, because we are still learning a lot about it. So first, I want to start with a real case. This is a real case. I only changed the names of them. This happened here in Bogota, Colombia. I chose not to bring the worst case. I chose to bring more of a typical case of something that occurs in an elementary school. And so the case started with some students pushing one that we're going to call here Mauricio, and he broke his arm. And it wasn't very clear who pushed him, but several of them, Roger and others, blamed Jason. So Jason was blamed for what happened to Mauricio, and he was rejected and excluded for some time. And that happened in 4th grade. And in 5th grade, that's when we found out about the situation when they were in 5th grade. In 5th grade, there was a fight among the boys, and the fight included Roger, Jason, and Mauricio, and others. And several during the fight hit Jason, and Jason required some attention, some medical attention because of how he was hurt. And that's when we found out about the case. And we have been working in that school, and we had been advising the school. But first, before telling you how the situation was managed, I want you to imagine how it could be managed. So I want you to think about in your country where you are, that now I'm seeing that there are people in many different places in United States, in Canada, in Australia. I don't know what time it is right now in Australia. And I want you to think about what is more common in your place. Not the ideal, but what is more common. And in our country, there is a traditional approach, and I want to show you what usually happens according to that traditional approach. Um, there, um, what usually happens is that the schools um, have a punitive approach in which the main point is to find who's guilty. And many times it's who started the situation. So the one to blame is usually the one who started the situation. And as you know, it's very hard to identify who starts a situation like this one, and it's very hard to identify one person who's guilty for everything that happens. But that's the common approach, the most common approach. And um and they usually that approach is based on sanctions. So who's guilty, that person is going to receive some sanctions. And we have like the norms of the schools are very specific about for which fault which sanction corresponds. So that's what usually happens. And there are some assumptions behind this approach. um, First of all, is one assumption is that it's usually an individual problem. So we have to find the individuals responsible for what's happening, and they should receive the sanctions. And the second assumption is that sanctions will help deter others from doing it. So there is a deterrent role played by sanctions, and that the people who are involved in those situations, they're going to learn from those sanctions, and they're going to learn not to do it again. And the assumption is that this is going to um, reduce the possibility of this happening again. And in many times the assumption is that the stronger the sanction, the greater the reduction in the probability that they will do it again. And as you can imagine, we have a lot of concerns about this. And some of them are that whenever we see a punitive approach, we see defensive reactions from those involved. And they start, for example, hiding information, not telling whatever happens, and trying to blame others. And so instead of assuming their own responsibility for what happens, they blame others. And many times they start blaming the victims, and they say, no, the victim is the one who started, the victim is the one who should receive the sanction. And then what we see is that they don't develop very much a concern for others, but they develop a fear of the sanction, some fear of sanctions, and they avoid doing things that will get them into trouble, not because of concern for others, but because of the risk of sanctions. So if they can find other ways to hurt others, so for example, through cyberbullying, using anonymity, for example, they will very easily move into that. So it's not that they really learn to avoid hurting others, but they learn how to do it without being caught up doing it. And on the other side, we are we are very excited about what's happening with restorative justice, and we have been learning a lot about restorative justice. And and the approach is very different. As you know, the approach is based on um, trying to repair damage, repair relationships, understand what is better for the community as a whole. And a process of restorative justice usually leads those involved to identify the damage, to think and identify the damage, to empathize with those who have been hurt, and to identify their own contribution. So instead of trying to find who's to blame And instead of thinking that who's the one who's to blame will receive 100% of the blaming, here is more the way we are working with restorative justice is more trying to identify how each one might have contributed to the situation growing and getting into what is happening right now. So, so to think about what is the damage to those who have been hurt and how I have contributed to that damage, either by doing something, either by laughing, for example, or by not doing anything, by seeing what was happening and just remaining passive. Um, so to identify each one's contribution in order to identify how each one can contribute to reparation of the damage. Um, so that's how the process usually goes, and the idea is to at the end to learn from the process and to learn to prevent aggression, not by the fear of a sanction, but by empathy. If you're able to connect emotionally to the emotions of others, then it's less likely that you're going to do something to hurt others. So that's the approach that we have been trying to promote. So, and when we think about these two approaches, and we think about how the literature has been analyzing the way to manage cases of bullying specifically, we have found two different approaches that are not exactly the same as the traditional punitive and the restorative justice approach, but are similar. So I want to right now mention those two approaches that uh, I'm sure several of you know, and I'm sure most of you know the work by Dan Olveus on prevention of bullying, but Dan Olveus also worked on managing cases of bullying when they already occur using the method of serious conversations. So what Donald Wales suggested for dealing with cases of bullying is to have a series of individual conversations with those involved in cases of bullying, specifically those who are suspected of being the bullies in the situations. And those individual conversations, and it's very important that they will be individual, not in groups, but individual, um, are based on confronting them and confronting them with sentences like, we know what is happening. This is not allowed here. It needs to stop immediately, or there will be consequences. Um, so it's going directly towards those who are probably bullying others and saying this needs to stop, otherwise there will be some sanctions. So sanctions is very important in Dan Olveo's work. And the idea is the same with parents. So parents are asked to go to the school, and the message is very similar. So we know this is happening in your child's classroom. Your child has been bullying his or her classmates, and this needs to stop. Otherwise, there will be sanctions. And if it doesn't stop, then there are sanctions. And also, Danovels promoted the idea of having more supervision. For example, in the classroom, in the breaks between classrooms, to have more teachers and adults observing what happens in trying to identify these situations. Well, we see some similarities with between this approach and the traditional punitive justice approach, especially the idea that students will stop the assumption that they will stop hurting others because of because they know that others are watching them, and if they do something, they're gonna receive some sanctions. Um, that's very different from the approach of Anatole Pikas. Pikas, I'm sure several of you know his work on the shared concern method. Pikas from Sweden, Dan Olveus from Norway, and the approach by Pikas is based on the idea of the no blame approach, on arriving not very different from Olveus. So instead of arriving saying, we know you have been doing this, the idea is to avoid defensive responses. So instead of saying, you know, you have been doing this, it's like, no, start the individual conversations, because it's also based on individual conversations, but started with, help us understand what is happening here and what is happening to this person, and trying to promote empathy towards the person who has been victim. So that's the idea of the shared concern. So to develop concern for the victim. So with questions like, what is happening? How is that person feeling? How can you help us? So instead of blaming the person, it's like trying to um, put put the person on your side. So there's a shared concern for what a problem that is occurring, and you can help us deal with this situation. And the idea is that after having several individual conversations, and using that conversation to develop that idea of we are going to work together to improve the situation, then reaching some agreements about what's going to be done differently from now on. And at the end, there will be a meeting with the victim, in which those who have been bullies could share with the victim what are their commitments, what they're gonna do differently next time. So when we found out about this, and this was a long time ago, several years ago, we decided to start with Picas, because it, at least for us, it made more sense in terms of the learning that we wanted to promote. And we found some very interesting potentials, but also we had some important concerns. And I want to share with you what happened. Oh, but before that, I wanted to mention that I don't know if you know this work. I highly recommend it, by Claire Garando, who is part of the work of the team led by Cristina Sarmivali in the Kiva project. Claire used the Kiva intervention in Finland to compare the two approaches, Olveus and Pica's approach. And they randomly assigned some schools to the Kiva, to the Olveus, more authoritarian approach, and some to the Pica's more no blame, share concern approach. And this was done in Finland, and they found in primary school. I want you to think about what you imagine. If you don't know the work, what would be your guesses about how do you compare the results of both methods in primary school and in secondary school? So in primary school, the results were almost exactly the same, and about 80%, which is very high, 80% rate of being able to stop situations of bullying when they use either one of these approaches. And now I want you to think about secondary school, and these are the results in secondary school. It was better, the Olveus approach for stopping situations of bullying, compared to the no blame approach. I don't know about you, but for us, this surprised us because we had many concerns about the Olveus approach, but to see that it was working better than the Picas approach um, made us at least think again what is happening. Um, in any case, we decided to start doing some pilots of the Picas approach and to follow very carefully what happened and to record sessions and qualitatively at a small scale to try to understand what was happening. And I want to tell you about one of these cases. So first of all, we we found out we realized that the PICAS approach does not include parents in the process, and at least in Colombia, by law, whenever there is a situation of bullying, schools need to communicate it to parents. So we need to learn how to do that communication. And PICA's protocol did not include information about how to relate to parents about it. The other thing that really concerned us was that um, we know from the work of several of you and of Cristina Salmivali's group and Deborah Pepler's group that we know that it's crucial to stop situations of bullying and to prevent bullying to involve bystanders and to promote an active defensive role by bystanders. And that wasn't part of Pica's approach. So we had doubts about how to include bystanders in the process. But in any case, there was one situation that really made us start thinking differently. And this was in a fourth grade, in a case of bullying among boys, very clear with all the components of the definition of bullying, imbalance of power, repetitive, and the school called us for support, and one of our team members, Melissa Castellanos, facilitated the process. And what Melissa started finding out very quickly was that shared concern occur fairly easily with those who had a role of assistance to the leader, but did not occur easily with the leader of the bullying. So, and that was very clear for us. And she reported it to us. She said, "I'm not seeing empathy with the leader." And at the end, the leader say, "Okay, let's continue." And that was in the individual conversation that Melissa had with each one of them. At the end, the leader say, "Okay, let's do it, let's continue," but he wasn't showing empathy towards the victim of the bullying. And then, well, when they got together in the meeting in which those who had been bullying got together with the victim and Melissa as the facilitator, then at one point, the leader of the bullying started bullying the victim right there in the middle of the meeting. And Melissa was very worried about it, was shocked, and they say, "No, you can't do that." And he started confronting her, like, "So what are you gonna do? What can you do about it? Is there a problem?" And then he said, "I know you're gonna start crying," saying to the facilitator who was part of our team and who's an expert in managing cases, and that was very hard for her to manage. And we at that point we realized that we were creating a situation in which again there was a power imbalance, And the leader saw the group as an opportunity to have an audience to again bully the victim. So immediately she stopped, and we stopped the recording, and then we analyze it. And what was clear for us is that we needed to do something different. We needed to include more the bystanders, and we needed to avoid those situations in which, again, there could be power imbalance and bullying. So there's a clear risk of aggression. I'm sorry, the paper is in Spanish, but I guess right now with all the artificial intelligence, it would be easy to translate it into English if you don't read Spanish. But the other thing that it was interesting in this case is that um, the afterwards we found out that the assistants, not the leader of the bullying, but the assistants, uh, complied with what they had promised. So they had promised, for example, to include more the victim whenever they would be playing during a break. They did it. The day after, the week after, they did it. And the other thing is that they stopped supporting the leader of the bullying. So just like Deborah Pepler or Cristina Salmivale would have guessed, bullying stopped. But it did not stop because of change in the leader, but it stopped because of change in the assistants. So the process was, at the end, it was successful. See? But we had many doubts about it. And the other doubt that we have was, it's not very clear in PICAS what happens if the situation continues. Um, so if there's the whole process, and then 2 weeks later, again, there are aggression and which show that bullying continues, then what should you do? Should you start all over again and start with the questions about help me understand what is happening and what can you do to improve the situation? That did not make sense for us. And it also, we are very worried about um, what parents could say about the process, especially parents of victims who could see the process as a process which promotes impunity. And we know that that has been a big problem for PICA's approach. And we know that in Great Britain, for example, I think it was Tony Blair who was shocked when he learned about the PICA's approach, and stopped all the support of the British government to PICA's approach because of that, specifically because of that perception of impunity. So we know that there should be a combination of approaches so that there won't be that perception of impunity. So based on all of that, we created an alternative approach. And the alternative approach we created with Veronica Cure some years ago. The idea is that, first of all, and that's like phase zero. Phase zero will be, you need to have many opportunities for those who see these situations or who suffer the situations to report it. So to create opportunities for reporting, and for example, creating a place in the website of the school, so you can do it even anonymously. So parents could report it, teachers could report it, bystanders could report it, victims could report it, anyone. And then we also know that we need an immediate response. So we know that if the process takes too long, then there is a risk that if you're going through the process, there's a risk that the aggression continues. So whatever is happening needs to stop. So with some, if we are understanding at least a little bit about what is happening. There should be, for example, teachers who should be ready to assertively say, this has to stop now, this cannot continue, and we are in the process of understanding better what can be done. And several times victims need support immediately. So there needs to be some immediate response, and that's why we put it into phase 0, because that has to happen immediately. But then the steps of the process include, the first step is to start by getting the perspectives of several of those who are around, especially bystanders. We even start by bystanders. We know that adults don't know very much of what's happening. Usually they don't know very much about what's happening in the dynamics of a peer group. The ones who know more about it are the classmates, and especially those who are not the aggressors of the victims, those who are around. So we start by collecting information from the bystanders, and we also do several individual interviews, very short interviews, interviews that are like 5-minute interviews, and to understand better what type of situation it is. In Colombia, there's a law, which we were actually part of the definition of that law, for dealing with peaceful relationships and prevention of aggression, prevention of violence. And the law describes 3 types of situations. Type 1 are more interpersonal conflicts in which there is not a big imbalance of power imbalance, and there could be some sporadic aggression, not something systematic. And those type 1 situations should be dealt with directly by the teachers, or by students who have been trained as peer mediators, or even by the students themselves, for example, in direct negotiation. That's type 1. So that's an immediate response without a very elaborate protocol. Type 2 are situations in which aggression is repetitive and there is an imbalance of power. That's, of course, bullying is right there. And type 3 situations are situations in which there could be some criminal act. For example, if it involves weapons, or if it involves sexual exploitation or something like that. So part of getting to understand better and having different perspectives is to understand if it is really a situation type 2, or if it is type 1 or type 3. If it is type 3, by law, the school should not manage the situation by itself, alone. It should involve other institutions, for example, the police or other institutions in the around the school. So the second is conversations, individual conversations with parents. By law, we have to do that, and we propose it to be in the PICA style, so in no blame approach. So instead of looking for parents saying your child is the bully of the classroom, we look for parents and say, we need your help. There's a situation of relationships in which several are involved, and we need to improve the situation, and we need your help, and we need the help of your child. So no blame approach. So in that way, we avoid the defensive reaction of parents, which is many times very strong and very difficult to manage. And we try to promote a relationship based on trust, because we need that trust to improve the situation. Then we have a conversation with those who, according to the information that we have collected, have been involved in the aggression, very much based on PICA's way of dealing with of relating with the students, and we have conversations with those who have been victims, and the conversation with those who have been victims has several goals. One of them is to explain the process and to explain very clearly that this is something that should be stopped, that is not okay that this is happening, and also to try to understand that if there's going to be a reparation of damage, how will you feel repair? What will you be um, hoping to achieve with a process like this? And if there's going to be something that the others are going to do publicly, will you like to be there? Will you like something public, or will you prefer something private? And to understand better, like the expectations of those who have been victims. And then the whole process, the main point of the process is to prepare um, an, as, an action in which those who have been involved in the aggression could identify the damage that they have contributed to produce, and to promote an idea which should be something simple and should be something that could be done in short time to repair that damage. So those are the projects, and the projects are the main ideas should come from the students, but the person who might be facilitating this, which many times is for example, the school psychologist who has been trained by us to do this, um, that person will help the students make the project something small, something feasible, and be careful that it's not against what the victim actually wants. Actually, when the project is ready, again, we talk to the victim and talk and say, well, this is what's happening. Are you okay if this occurs? And then the project gets to an end, it finishes, but we have a follow-up. And for the follow-up, we are using a rule that I first heard from Wendy Craig in Toronto. And Wendy uses the 3-2-1 rule. And that the idea is that 1 week after conducting a process like this, we look for those involved, especially for bystanders and for the victim, and we ask them 3 times in a week, what's happening? Is everything okay? Has the situation improved? 1 week later, we ask them 2 times, and 1 week later, 1 time. And if everything is okay, then we close the case and say, okay, this worked well. If bullying continues, then what we're proposing, but we have not done because it has worked all the time that we have implemented it, but we have it in the case that if the situation continues, then we will use an approach like Olvels suggested. So the idea is not to do restorative justice, and if it doesn't work, then restorative justice, and if it doesn't work, then restorative. No, we try restorative justice once. If it doesn't work, then there will be serious conversations saying if this needs to stop. If it doesn't stop, there will be some sanctions. That's the alternative that we have promoted. So I want to go back to the case of Roger, Jason, and Mauricio. And in that case, what happened? We collected the perspectives, and when we collected, I mean, there was the school psychologist was collecting those perspectives of the case. What she found out is that Jason had been victim of bullying for 2 years, and that Jason was not the one who pushed Mauricio and who broke his arm, but he was accused, but because he was victim of bullying, he um, was not able to say, well, I wasn't the one who did it. He was too afraid of the consequences of that. Um, what and in the individual conversations with Roger, Jason, some friends, and their parents, they were able to recognize the damage and to identify that they contributed, and at the end they they were able to admit, yeah, we made him feel bad. We have made him feel bad for a long time, for 2 years, and and they say, okay, we could. They decided to do something to repair that damage, and the reparation that they proposed were very simple. It was a very simple idea. Is that we have made him feel bad. Let's do something to make him feel better, to make him feel good. And they knew, they understood that they could not repair the damage 100%, but they knew that they could do something to repair at least part of the damage by making him making him feel well. So they did an activity in class organized by them. These were fifth graders, about 11 years of age. They organized the activity in which each one in the classroom should say something nice or something that would make Jason feel better. So that's what they did. And they did around the class. Each one was saying something good. And what really was surprising and interesting for all of us was that when they finished doing the whole round of nice comments about Jason, Roger um, turned to the teacher and say, "Teacher, you too. You too should say something nice about Jason." And the teacher was very surprised. And Roger added, "Yeah, because when we made fun of Jason, you also laughed. You were there and you saw and you laughed." And the teacher say, "Okay, you're right. You're right." And it was hard for her, but she admitted, and she then said something nice about him. And that was it. I mean, I wanted to show you this case also because it's a very simple case and improved completely the situation. And we did the 3-2-1 follow up, and situation improved completely for Jason. I want to end with some open questions that we have. Um, as I said at the beginning, we are still in the learning process. We're still innovating, trying out, learning, doing some innovations. And there are some things in which we don't have agreement within the group. And for example, as I told you, what we're doing is starting by the restorative approach, but then we know that um, if it doesn't work, we're going to try something different. And we are inspired by Olveus. So in a way, we are combining traditional with restorative approaches. And we have analyzed this in other contexts. In the legal constitutional court in Colombia, there are cases in which they combine the two, and also at the university level. Here in my university, Universidad de los Andes, I'm also advising these cases here, and we have like two different tracks for faults by the students. One is for minor faults, and the other one is for severe faults. And for minor faults, right now the university is managing it almost completely by restorative justice. And I have been supporting that approach, and it has been working really well. But we also know that, I mean, for more serious cases, there is a disciplinary sanction. But what we are doing here is that we're combining the disciplinary sanction with a restorative component. So, for example, the student is suspended for 1 semester, but during that semester, the student should uh, reflect with the support of one of us. The student should reflect on the damage that what he or she did to those people involved, and they should also propose an alternative to repair the damage. So even though there's a sanction, the reflection and the promotion of empathy is also occurring at the same time. So we are still dealing with how to combine the two. We know that if we start by the only punitive, it's very difficult to then promote a real empathic reflection, but we are trying out, and at least at the university level is working. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that um, we have seen cases in which the victim leaves the school and doesn't and changes school and doesn't want anything to do with the former school. So it's very difficult to do a reparation of the damage directly to the victim. So what we're doing is trying to include also, whenever we can, a reparation of the damage to the community. And that's part of the reflection about the damage, to think that whatever I did could have hurt a specific person, but could have also hurt a whole community, a whole group. And repairing the damage to the community, what has happened in the cases that we have supported is that they have done something to contribute to the prevention of the cases happening again. So a way to repair damage to the community is to go, for example, to other classrooms. So for example, 10th graders go to 8th and 9th graders and say, well, I want to share with you a situation that I learned about. And the other thing that has happened is that, and this is again in at the university level, is that instead of going and showing and telling directly, they have created campaigns, and in which their name is never there. So it's more anonymous campaigns. So campaigns for others not to do what they did, and that as a way of repairing damage to the community. And the final question that I have is, how does this work at different ages? Um, we have not done something like this right for preschool, for example. The youngest that we have worked is, I think, 4th grade, but we are doing it at a university level too, and it has been working very well at all the levels that we have been trying it out. But again, this is still at a pilot phase. This is still at a small scale, so we still have questions about what can we do or should we do differently, and we still don't really understand Claire Garandot's result that the Olveo's approach worked better in secondary grades than the PICAS approach. But so we still have a lot of questions about age-specific concerns about this. So thank you very much.